We are at Gibson Showroom in Austin during South by Southwest. I'm Kristen Kurtis. I'm sitting next to Colin Hanks and Sean Stuart, Emmy-nominated actor on stage, film, and TV. Also from more behind the scenes on the TV side of things, launched and ran a network for DIRECTV called the 101 Network.
Correct.
How did the two of you meet?
We actually grew up 2 blocks away? No, 3 blocks away.
Yeah, 3 blocks away from each other.
In Sacramento, California. So we've known each other since we were 13.
Yep, 13 years old.
We've been best friends forever, but we never went to the same school, which is the kind of interesting thing that only the two of us find
interesting. Yeah, no one else will find that interesting at all.
But we both moved down to LA at the same time. We lived together after college, and based on his experience, making the 101 and all of his, sort of producerial experience in TV. When I was thinking about, doing this Tower Records documentary, he was actually the first person I thought of because he knows all that stuff, and I normally wear makeup for a living, so I needed someone who.
But you wear it well.
No, thank you.
You do. All right. So, how did you're from Sacramento, that's where the Tower Records started, and you made this documentary, which just debuted a couple days ago. Congratulations here at South by Southwest.
Thank you very much.
Rise and fall of Tower Records, all things must pass. What made you decide to make a documentary about Tower Records?
Quite simply, 'cause no one else had really done it. That was really it. I was having a conversation with a family friend who's also from Sacramento when the stores were closing, and she mentioned in passing, that it was hard to believe that that all started in that little drugstore. And I said, "Excuse me, what?" I didn't quite know what she was talking about, and that sort of was the light bulb moment for me, because I figured, okay, well, if Russ Solomon, the founder of Tower Records, if he started selling used 78s out of his father's drugstore in 1939, and then closed, close to 200 stores around the world in 2006, that's an incredible journey. So that was this sort of initial spark. And then also, we're both from Sacramento, and we have, there's a lot of civic pride when it comes to Tower.
Yeah, and Colin, when he approached me about it in 2007, it felt like a no-brainer. And I think within about 5 months, we had sat down with Russ and had our first 6-hour interview with him. And within 5 minutes, knew we had an incredible character, an incredible interview and documentary subject to deal with. It was off to the races from there.
You just said 2007.
Yeah.
It is now 2015.
Yeah.
It took 7 or 8 years to make this documentary?
It did.
From the initial idea to final execution, because really it's a couple of different factors, one of which was by the time that we had shot just an initial amount to be able to basically put together a sizzle reel, as they're called. By the time we had started taking that around to financiers, Western civilization was on the brink of going bankrupt. And every place we went to pretty much politely said, look, no one really cares about a record store that went bankrupt 2 years ago when Lehman Brothers and, the big 3 car companies are about to go under. That's more important. And I think at that time, within the film industry, documentaries were still primarily shown in theaters. There were really only a couple of exceptions of documentaries actually making any money back. And chances are those were important documentaries. They had to solve important world issues or, highlight something that, some cause. And pretty much everyone just said, no, it's just, I don't think anyone's going to want to see that. And I think that also has to do with the fact that Tower had still just closed and everyone was just like, okay, well, yeah, I heard about that on the news, but I don't need to see a documentary about it. But as time moved on and technology changed, I think a couple of things happened. Cameras got a lot cheaper so we could actually make the documentary. Kickstarter came around and we were actually, we were one of the first documentary films. I don't want to say the first, but we were within a group that had really, embraced it kind of early on, and now it's the norm. But then I think ultimately also, now that it's been almost 10 years since the stores has closed, there's a little bit more nostalgia for it and a little bit more of an appetite to be able to go like, oh yeah, I remember Tower Records. I really dug it. And so it worked out the way that it worked out.
The nostalgia factor. When you guys think of Tower Records, what kind of memories come to mind?
I mean, it was the place we went on weekends. It was the place we went after school. It was the place we met people. We had a smaller record store in Sacramento called The Beat, but getting to Tower was kind of like making that pilgrimage to the place where the deep catalog was. So we were able to, really get to know music through Tower Records. That was the only conduit back then. So the nostalgia for us, Colin tells the story, and I think it's a great one. But it's hard to remember the where you were when you downloaded a song, but you always remember where you were when you bought a certain album, and it sticks with you. And it's that tactile and experience thing that happens when you stayed there until midnight on Monday night for New Music Tuesday, or rushed to the store Tuesday morning because that brand new album was being released that you wanted to get your hands on. So I think that's probably the core of the nostalgia that we feel for the Tower Records brand and the company that we shopped at constantly.
Right, and that's how you felt about it personally. Did you get any new feelings for Tower throughout the 7 years that you were making this documentary, or learn something that created new opinions for you?
I mean, absolutely. I think we definitely did. Russ Solomon, the founder of the company, is such an endearing character. When we first sat down with him, began immediately to give credit to everyone else that was involved with the company. It didn't matter, if you were a clerk or if you were an executive in the company. Every one of those people he gave every one of those people the credit for how successful Tower was. So we learned a lot about ourselves in this filmmaking process and about how we should best run our production. A lot from watching how Russ handled his employees and the people he worked with at Tower as well. So I think we took a lot out of it.
Yeah, I mean, when we sort of first approached Russ, it was really just sort of more, again, I was focusing on like what that journey was. And so it was like, what years did you open stores, and the sort of luck, kismet kind of thing. But once we sat down with him and we realized how long people worked at the company, the relationships that people had, the sort of foundations, the personal connections and foundations that Tower instilled, in their employees, and what that bond was like, then it became a much more personal story that I don't think we really thought much about at the time. But I mean, we got incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
Really. I think Russ has just sort of influenced us both tremendously throughout this whole process.
After 30 or 40 years, it really did. I saw the documentary. I thought it was wonderful. I really enjoyed it, by the way.
Thank you.
After 30 or 40 years, it did seem like it was just as much of a documentary about Russ Solomon as it was about Tower Records. And something that really struck me, I don't know what your final takeaway of the film was yet, I'd love to know, but something that struck me after watching this was toward the end, when one of the employees got really teary and had to step away from the camera, that Tower and music in general, it almost became its own entity, and it was a family member that was taken away. Is that something that feels? Yeah,
I mean, definitely. The one of the big sort of ideas that we talked about a lot with Stephen, our writer, and our producer Glenn Zipper, and our editor Darren Roberts, was this idea of, these people came together and formed their own family, all based around music. And when Tower was in the long sort of death rattle over the final 2 years, and people started, to getting laid off, and friends had to fire other friends, that was like a death in the family as well. And in a strange way, the way Russ looks at it now, he doesn't sit there and bemoan the fact that Tower closed. It's sort of, I always got the feeling like he's gone through his 5 stages of grief already. Because he says, at the end of the film, like, look, it's gone. I mean, there's nothing we can do about it, so what's next? Which is kind of a way, that, people deal with, with a loss like that. Like eventually you just have to get over it. But they're all still so close, and they still get together all the time, and they really are just such a family that now we're part of that family, which is incredible for us. And it's yeah, I mean, it's music's the part of the family again because of the personal connection, but then they are such a tight knit group. It's really the thing that we wanted to really hang our hat on with the documentary and really drive home, because again, that's something that people don't know. There are tons of little business insidery things that people don't know. The average music fan won't know that's in the documentary, but at the end of the day, we really try to tell as personal a story as we can.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that excited us at the end of the filmmaking process too was seeing that people were coming to this film and expecting a historical doc about the music industry. But this film really at its core is about human beings and about relationships and about loving something. And ultimately there's themes in this that I think anyone can identify with in a way where if you're not even a music fan, you can go watch this movie and there's something in it for you. Which is exciting because that's when you have a well-rounded documentary, when it's not too specific for a certain audience. So
I thought you did touch a little bit on the impact that Tower had in the history of music, or at least for a few decades there anyway. And the thing is that Tower...
Just a few decades.
Just a few decades.
Yeah. Just a few.
Just a couple. But the thing is that Tower, it's gone in the US, but still exists in Japan, which is something that you absolutely touched on in the documentary. Do you think that's you don't think that Russ struggles with that at all?
No, he doesn't.
Spoiler alert.
Yeah, there's a little spoiler alert here, but he Japan is and always will be this incredibly fascinating island and this incredibly fascinating culture. But one of the things that we talked about when we were there filming was the fact that, for whatever reason, and it's kind of hard to understand completely, but because of the presence of the U.S. after World War II, it's almost ingrained in them that America gets stuff first and then Japan gets stuff second, which is the polar opposite of what we think of Japan, because they got all the cool technology and then we get it 5 years later, or so it seems. But that sort of concept combined with the art of custom, which they have spent thousands of years refining, and the the trait of having no issue walking up 8 flights of stairs to go buy a toothbrush. Like, these small little things make Japan this super special sort of almost like time capsule. And for whatever reason, streaming is not yet really caught on there. It's probably going to come eventually, and all the people there at Tower know that, and they've obviously had a few years to sort of look at what happened here and try and find the best way to adapt. But yeah, he looks at the Tower in Japan and he's just proud of it, because it's he even says it's the same thing that Tower did, always. Deep catalogs, good clerks. The clerks are a lot nicer in Tower. That's the only big difference.
Yeah, I mean, and it's his legacy. It's the one piece of his legacy. So I think for him, it's a moment of pride thinking about it when we hear him talk about it. So.
Back here in the U.S., there are some independent record stores. Right here in Austin, we have
Yes.
Waterloo.
Waterloo Records,
That's right.
Yes.
And there's Amoeba, which is
In
up and
LA.
down California
Yep.
now. Do you think, in a perfect world, that Tower should have done something like that?
Yes,
Absolutely.
absolutely. I talk with some of my friends in the music industry, and they all just sort of shake their head and said, "Man, if they were just able to hang around for another 2 years, they would have been okay." But they made a couple of big flaws. They didn't sell used CDs, which supplemented so much of the lost income that a majority of other stores had. They made a play to save all of the Tower Records stores instead of contracting and trying to save the big flagship stores. That ended up hurting them. But really, at the end of the day, and the thing that we really talk about in the film, is they just expanded too far, too fast, and was in just too much debt. And there was really nothing they can do.
Yeah, they were a couple $100 million in debt before Amazon, or excuse me, before Netflix. Wow,
Amazon, Netflix.
Too much distribution here at this festival. Before iTunes existed and before Napster existed, they were already a few $100 million in debt. So, one of the things that we try to explore in this film is what really went into their demise, because people try to simplify it so often to, the internet. The internet killed Tower Records, but there's a much bigger story there. There's a much more interesting story there with a lot more layers, a lot of hubris, and it's a journey. It's a real journey that they went on.
We keep bringing up money, which is interesting, that money ends up playing a role that is not intended when people start out projects, and that's why I think it's interesting that you crowdfunded All Things Must Pass. What went into that decision? We were talking earlier about how when you first came up with the idea, the economy was not doing well. I'm wondering if that had anything to do with it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, for us, we were at a point where we could not find the funding. This new technology had arisen, and we felt like it was pretty much our last chance to keep this project from hitting the shelf. We didn't have a way to really finance this and no one to turn to. So that money that we got from those Kickstarter backers really did what we hoped it would do. It got us 20 interviews. We were able to continue pushing the story forward. And then essentially we were able to take that media that we brought together and the story that we put together there, and then go out and raise additional funds to make the movie that needed to be made. The amount of money we raised, you could have made a version of a Tower Records documentary for that amount of money, but it would have been a disservice to this incredible story. I mean, you're trying to tell 5 decades of history here, and we wanted to make sure that we represented Russ's legacy as best as we could, and in a way that would have made him proud and made us proud when we finished.
And a couple of big charges on a credit card and a bank loan later, here we are.
7 years later.
7 years later, yes.
7 years later. So it's been 7 years you're working on it. It debuted just 2 days ago here at South by Southwest. Sometimes when I work in radio, and sometimes when I'm listening to music, it feels different when I'm alone listening to songs that I'm considering adding to our playlist, and then when I'm playing them again with other people that are helping me make this decision, all of a sudden they sound different. Have you had any experiences like that when you're watching it in a room full of people for the first time?
Oh gosh, yeah. I mean, we were really surprised at the reception that we got at our opening. It's a completely different experience watching a film that is not necessarily a comedy, because in a comedy when people are supposed to laugh. And we edited the film, and we obviously edited it, to make things light, and we think things are funny, but you just don't know if other people are going to notice it. And the reception that we got, not only in terms of laughter, but then also talking with people after the film, saying people are like, "Oh my God, I started crying. I didn't know that was going to happen." And yeah, I had grown men saying, "Man, once I saw those 2 grown men crying, then I was a grown man crying." It's those kinds of things. It definitely was a lot of fun for us. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think all filmmakers need to set up test screenings as well during the process. I mean, this is where you figure out where the moments hit right and where the moments hit wrong, and whether or not you're doing it correctly. And I think that probably relates back to what you're talking about with music by yourself or music in a room full of people, because you really do need test audiences to kind of tell you what works and what doesn't. We were getting laughs in places we never imagined we'd get laughs in this movie, and people were identifying with things and characters in ways that the emotional journey they went on, we never thought they'd go on it in the way they did. And then, we've had 2 screenings now. The first audience was much different than the second audience. It felt like the first audience was just exuberant, and the second one felt like they were a little more analytical about the film. But you could feel the different tones in each space, and it's pretty exciting.
But both were engaged.
Yeah, very
which
engaged.
Was the most important thing.
Yeah.
It's very engaging. The pace of the documentary moves really quick. It keeps you in there, and you're like, oh, we're talking about a different aspect of what's going on right now. I was going to ask a question, and it's gone.
You want to talk about the music in the movie?
Yeah, let's talk about the music in the movie.
The music we chose. One of the everyone said early on, like, this is going to be an incredibly hard movie to do because of all the music, and I didn't really know what that meant. but they were correct. The music was rather hard to do, but really it's more self-inflicted than anything else. I very early on wanted to sort of come up with a concept album for our soundtrack. Basically, every song that's featured in the film represents a different aisle of a Tower Records. And so, because we cover, roughly 40 years and 50 years really within the music industry, we cover eras, but we also cover genres. So we have jazz, we have a little bit of classical, we have rock, we have punk, we have R&B, we have soul, we actually have a soundtrack in there because, let's not forget the soundtrack aisle of the Tower Records. So we sort of wanted to come up with this theme, and what we ended up realizing once it was time to really, ask for licensings and stuff like that, not only were the artists incredibly ready to and willing to have their music in the film because they love Tower, but all of the people on the label side and on the publishing side as well were much more gracious than they normally would be for a small independent documentary
with
film.
no money.
With no money. Read no money.
Yeah.
So really we were able to get a lot of really big name acts. I mean, we have, obviously George Harrison in there. We have the Beach Boys. We have the Rolling Stones. We have Steve Miller Band. We have T-Rex. But then we also have newer acts like Benjamin Booker. And who else do we got? We got a lot of people.
We got a lot of people.
We got a lot of people.
And we pulled it all off in 6 weeks.
And we pulled it off in 6 weeks.
Yeah, we cleared all those artists in 6 weeks. I mean, that'll tell you, anyone who's in the music industry, they'll know to deal with labels and publishers and get that much cleared in 6 weeks, there's some goodwill for the movie because that does not happen.
And I got desperate and just started reaching out to people. I started reaching out to people on Twitter.
Yeah, social media.
Yeah.
If there's an irony here in that as well, we know it. Colin used social media to get to Mick Jagger.
Yep.
Hey, if it works.
If it works.
Well, he doesn't have the Twitter, but
No.
the
Get
fifth
to
person
him.
away from him
Yes.
has Twitter. It's like
10 degrees removed,
yeah.
but we got there.
Did you have a music supervisor? Did you actually have someone who used to work at Tower help you pick the music?
No, in fact, we have a music supervisor, yes, but we actually my editor was one of the guys most responsible for the music in the film.
Yeah.
I had a couple of specific songs in mind for certain sequences that I wanted in the film, but overall, I was. One of the things I really borrowed from Russ was this idea of hiring people and then letting them do their jobs and not interfering and meddling too much. He calls it the Tom Sawyer theory of business, let someone else paint the fence. And so really what I did is I told, in my first conversation with Darren, I said, I want you to find whatever music inspires you for this sequence. This is what the sequence should be about. Go, let's talk about it. And there were some tracks that he picked that I put the kibosh on because I was the boss. But a majority of the tracks he selected, and they were fantastic. They were great.
It does really sound like you took on the personality of Russ Solomon as you moved through this, and I think working that way probably led to a better reflection of what working at Tower was like. Yeah,
I mean, I hope so. The one of the big takeaways for us with this is that although the company went away, the way that Russ handled things and the way that Russ treated us, because we're just two punk kids from Sacramento that said we want to make a documentary, and he believed in us. He said, "You're crazy, but let's go." And that sort of belief, from the very beginning, really influenced us, and it's totally revolutionized the way that I look at business and entrepreneurs and filmmaking and young people, having some crazy idea and just throwing everything they can at it. I mean, it's just changed the way I look at a lot of different things, and now I understand what everyone in the film talks about when they're talking about Russ. Russ just has this way of looking at the world where you just go, yes, wherever you're going, that's where I want to go, because I'm going to have the most fun possible, and I'm going to learn so much while doing it. And he did not disappoint.
Are these the things that you would say someone like you is getting into making documentaries or films for the first time? Are these some of the things you would pass on to them? What are some of the things you learned and things that you would try to impress upon someone who is approaching a project, a big one like this?
Well, make a documentary about a beloved corporation. That definitely helps.
Absolutely. Yeah, make a documentary about something that you love, but that's also beloved by other people. There's a relatability there at its core. But I think for filmmakers that are embarking on their first film, getting that first one under your belt is the most important thing. I think the experience you'll have, but just that's the stepping stone. Get that first one out and get it into the world, and don't be afraid to fail. We last Friday they had the South by Southwest filmmakers luncheon. And Robert Rodriguez spoke, and the core of his speech was really about not being afraid to fail. Russ actually went bankrupt a couple times before he started, long ago in the beginning of his story and his journey. And I think as filmmakers, it's the same thing. You can't be afraid to have your film come here and flop. You can't be afraid to not get your film into the festival. You got to get out there and just make it and learn from it. So.
Russ went bankrupt again after Tower closed. He opened up another store.
Yeah.
When we first approached him, he had opened up another store in Sacramento in the same Tower location. Same colors. He called it R5 Records. And that lasted about 3 years. And I thought, like, oh my goodness, I just lost the ending of my film. So, you just got to keep going, keep trying.
Are we talking about the Sunset location?
No, this was in Sacramento.
Okay, because the Sunset location is taking on another life.
It is, thanks to the good people here at Gibson, which we're incredibly thankful for. Yeah, they just took over the lease, so it's going to be a great Gibson showroom and maybe something similar to what we're sitting in here right now.
Yeah, we've got the yellow and the red branding with the records stacked everywhere.
Yeah, we threw a party here on Monday night where they helped sponsor our party for our premiere of our movie and brought in a bunch of vinyl and gave records away at the party, and everybody got a ketchup and mustard Tower Records plastic bag to walk out the door with. So it was a great event.
We brought Tower Records back for one night.
One night.
I think you've brought it back in hearts for a lot longer than one night. I mean, the documentary is really great.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy that it's being received very well. You have another screening tonight, and then what happens after South by Southwest is over?
We're going to do a screening at the Grammy Museum in Los Angeles on the 25th, which unfortunately is sold out. But
we've added a second one too in April. So
the demand is so big.
Yeah.
And then the big treat for us is we're going to screen in Sacramento at a very important landmark in Sacramento history. It's called the Tower Theater, which is in the same building where Russ's father's drugstore was located, back where Russ started selling those used 78s and 39s. So
get to bring the project home.
Yeah, and they're going to be about 200 Kickstarter backers, I think. And probably 75 of which are old former Tower Records employees. So it's going to be a fun party.
After 7 or 8 years, you're just getting to enjoy the finished product of this film now. But they say that, loving art is in the process. Yeah. So I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves because you're just enjoying the fact that All Things Must Pass, The Rise and Fall of Tower Records has been released. But do either of you, are you working together again, or do you individually have anything on the horizon that you're going to be working in next?
I mean, I've still, got to wear makeup to put food on my table. So I'm still doing a bunch of acting work, but since we've started making this movie, we've formed a production company, and now we produce documentaries. So this is our first feature, but we have a couple of shorts.
Yeah, four documentaries with the SPN that we're in various stages of production and post-production on. So.
And we're working on others, and we've also done some stuff with KCRW out in Los Angeles, and so we've been busy doing that, and we. Again, that entrepreneurial spirit that we picked up from Ross, we just sort of went, okay, well, it's time for us to try and do the same thing. Yeah.
Having an impact on people's lives in all kinds of ways, isn't it?
That's right.
Trying to.
It's all about the people. Well, Colin Hanks, Sean Stuart, thank you very much for taking 15 minutes or so and chatting about your new documentary. Congratulations on the success so far, and I'm looking forward to seeing what else you guys do together.
Thank you
very much.
Thanks
a lot.
Appreciate it. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.